I love new stuff. And one interesting thing that happened is that our Christmas got so busy that it wasn't until the day after Christmas that I got to finally play with my new stuff that I got for Christmas. And I was looking so forward to it. We kept having something come up, and then finally I had like nothing. I had one little thing that I had to do on the day after Christmas, but other than that, it was completely free. And I remember waking up and, man, just feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. It had been so busy for Christmas weekend, and I don't know if that's how it was for you guys or not, but we did a whirlwind trip to Harlan County to see family, and we hosted at our house, and it was weird. I woke up the day after Christmas and I slept as long as I could. I slept out. And there's nothing that, man, that's a great feeling, isn't it? Sleeping out, where you're like, I can't sleep anymore. That felt good. Normally I get up way before I sleep out, But I remember waking up and saying, my feet are already sore. How are my feet sore already, I must have been running through Sherry's mind all night, I guess. I don't know. But I love, and I was thinking, okay, finally I can play with my new stuff. And when I say play with my new stuff, I didn't get a bunch of toys. I did get one toy, a quadcopter. It's totally cool. I felt like a little kid again. I'm still learning how to get this little 4-propeller thing to do what it's supposed to do, And it was so funny. Like, I was playing with it, finally got it working, and then it died. And I'm like, hey, that was weird. And then I looked in the instructions, and you have to charge the battery. It takes an hour and a half to charge the battery. And the battery lasts 5.5 minutes. Says so right in the manual. It was just, that's by design, I guess, So I'm like, oh, okay. And so it's like a teaser. It's like, I get to play with my helicopter. That was good. All right, put it up. And that's it, But I was looking so forward to getting to do that. I finally got to do it. And it got me thinking about it. The one thing that is really neat about New Year's Day, if you let it be neat, is that it's neat to think about a new start. You can think in terms of a new year, a new start, a new beginning, some new ways of doing things. And I think that's why a lot of people do set New Year's resolutions. And I think about how much I love new stuff, and I thought I get excited about something that's new, trying a new restaurant, getting a new book, doing something new I've not done before with my family. Those things get me excited. I even love learning something new. Sometimes it's neat to realize, hey, there's of doing something that we've never done before, and that's kind of nice. I remember years ago learning, this is a kind of a nerdy thing to share, but learning that if you hold the control button on your computer and use X, C, or V, that you can cut, copy, or paste anything. And I learned that. Now, I learned that a long time ago. For those of you who knew that a long time, I didn't learn that yesterday. But when I learned that, I was like, wow, that's way quicker to do that. For another little simple thing, when we started Upward Basketball, which we're about to start, we're getting the thick of it here this month, our games will begin. For the first 9 years we had Upward Basketball, I directed that. And I remember awards night's the big climax at the end of the season. We have a big deal. It's like a big, giant, awesome celebration. We present the gospel in a real fun and powerful way for the kids, and we have lots of decisions. It's great. They get their end of the year awards. Well, those awards ship in these bigger boxes way before awards night, and I would spend a week or two before awards night opening up each of those boxes, and I'd get either a bag or a smaller box, and I would print out all the rosters to the teams, and I'd get that roster, and I would get an award for each of the kids. They're all the same awards for the basketball players and the same for the cheerleaders, but I'd put them all in the bag, make sure they equaled the count on the roster, put the roster in there, got that together, and then at awards night, whatever row the team was sitting on, I'd set that bag or that box where the team would sit, and I did all that prep. And I remember when Bill Risher was Minister of Recreation, and we were making a transition where he was taking over directing that league, and he directed it for the first time. And I remember coming to awards night, and I saw that he had all those awards in a big box, just right there up front. And they all got their awards, and then that was it. And I thought, well, that's an easy way to do that. I wish I'd have thought of that. I'd have saved myself 2 weeks of work if I would have thought to do it a little easier. I don't know if you've had moments like that, like I could have had a V8. That's a lot easier to do things that way, I wish I would have known that a long time ago. That's an easier way to do that. That's a better way to do that. And those moments I actually like. Sometimes I feel bad when I have those moments because I realize that I could have been doing things better. I could have been doing things quicker or smarter. But I love that. And that's, I guess, I'm sort of using that as a way to kind of get us to this point where I want you to hear this today. As we begin this new sermon series, this is a couple of questions you'll hear me say a lot for the next several weeks. But these are two of the best questions you can ever ask. What could be and what should be? Great questions to ask. And I would say if you're not asking those questions, you need to start. And ask it about all kinds of things. Ask it about all kinds of areas of your life. These are very important questions to ask. Now, I'm not a very innovative or creative person. If I do anything that can be accused of being creative, it was probably because I borrowed it from someone else. That's not me, but I have experienced times in my life where I've realized here's a better way to do that. Usually I've gotten that from someone else and I've put it into action. I'm like so glad that I experienced that. And I've had that happen enough in my life to where over the years I've started asking these questions more and more. What could be? What should be? Such as in areas like this, where are you spiritually right now? What could be spiritually in your life? What should be spiritually in your life? Or such as the state of your marriage or other relationship that you are in. What could be? What should be in that relationship? Or your health or your finances. Or even what this church is doing to reach the 85% unchurched around us. I should be asking what could be and what should be about that as well. Listen, if you never ask what could be or what should be, you will absolutely stay stuck in what is. Whatever is for you right now, that's where you'll stay if you never ask what could be or what should be. And we may begin to be so comfortable with what is that we don't even want to ask those questions. But I'm here to tell you, if we don't, that is absolutely where we will stay. But every now and then in life, something happens that shakes us so much to the core that we begin to not only ask those questions, but we begin to seek answers and do something about it. Every now and then in life, something will happen that will shake us to our very core to begin to really ask and answer those questions and do something about it. And maybe it's a tragedy. Maybe it's a change that was thrust upon us in our life. Sometimes it's a health issue. Sometimes it's a relational issue. Sometimes it's an injustice that we've experienced. Or maybe it's just an epiphany, maybe even from God that, oh my goodness, here's something, wow, that I've never thought of before. But sometimes something happens that shakes us. And it can be, if we will allow it, to become a turning point where we ask what could be and what should be, and we move away from just what is and do something about it. Now, this happened to a man named Nehemiah. And we're going to actually look together today and for the next 5 weeks at the historical account of his life that we find in the book of Nehemiah. That works out really good. It's deep in the Old Testament. If you have your copy of the Bible, feel free to turn there. We're going to be looking at the whole first chapter together this morning. Don't worry, that's only 11 verses. It's a short chapter. But we'll be looking at that. While you are moving over to there or swiping over to there or turning your pages to there, let me give you a little bit of context. Now, we're beginning a new sermon series called Under Construction. And I love it. I'm excited about it because when I think about God doing something new in you personally, doing something new in me personally, but also doing something new in our church, that this is what He does. He puts us under construction. And in my mind would argue that this is probably where we stay most of our lives, right? God is always doing something new, making us better, making improvements, remodeling us all through our lives. And I want us to think about that concept, and what we're going to experience today and the next 5 weeks after is just one thing that we ought to do, that we must do, that we can do to experience a next step to be able to become the new person God wants us to be. And not only us personally, but even our church here at Hickory Grove. So let me give you a little bit of context, though, with the book of Nehemiah. The context of when this was written, Israel is captive. In fact, they've been captive for a while. Nehemiah is the sequel to the book of Ezra, which is right before Nehemiah. And it was actually Babylon who had captured Israel and taken them into captivity. Well, Babylon was overthrown by Persia. So when we start reading in Nehemiah, actually at that time, Persia had Israel. And there was a remnant that was still back in Israel, in Jerusalem. There were still people there that were living. And Nehemiah, however, had a job working for the king there in Persia. And you're going to find out what his job was real briefly, but that's the context. It's not the best of times for Israel. It had not been the best of times for a while. And what we're going to see here in chapter 1 is Nehemiah kind of hears a report about how things are, what the mood is in Jerusalem. So let me read that for you, the first 11 verses. It says, "The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hickory. Now it happened in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the citadel, that Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem." So he's asking about the people that were still in Jerusalem. "And they said to me, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire." Now, I've not lived in a city that was surrounded by a wall before, and I don't know what that must feel like or what that must mean, but this was a big, big deal. It says in verse 4, "As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. And I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven." It shook him. This is one of those moments that forces you to say, what happened? And maybe even begin to ask what could be or what should be. It goes on to say in verse 5, "And I said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant, that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house have sinned." Here he is, just coming before God humbly. It says in verse 7, "We have acted very corruptly against you and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, and the rules that you commanded your servant Moses. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples." And just pausing right there, they're living that now. They're living out that prophecy. God had warned them, if you continue to chase after other false gods, this will happen. And that's exactly what happened. And here in verse 9, though, it says, "But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are in uttermost parts of heaven, from there I will gather them and bring them to the place that I have chosen to make my name dwell there." Even though they were experiencing the consequences, in his prayer, Nehemiah is reminding God not only of the consequences, but the promise he made to bring them back together. Verse 10, "They are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man." Sounds weird, but what he's about to do is meet with the king. And it says, "Now I was cupbearer to the king." Ooh, cliffhanger. We're going to leave you hanging right there. Then we don't know what's going to happen next. We're just going to look at chapter 1 today. However, I am going to do something I normally do not do. It's a real peeve of mine, actually. I don't like to hear how a movie ends or how a TV show ends or how a book ends. It's like the worst. I don't like hearing that at all. My kids might go watch a movie that they know I'm going to see eventually, and they'll say, "Oh, Dad, let me tell you all about it." And I'm like, "No, I don't want to hear anything about it." And they don't like that. And I hate doing that to them, but I don't like knowing. But I'm going to go against every fiber of my being, and I'm going to tell you how the book of Nehemiah ends. And the reason I am is because I think it's going to be important to know where it's heading so you can kind of understand the journey of how Nehemiah got there. Now, if you're like me and you don't want to know how it ends, just stick your fingers in your ear and go la 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 la. You don't have to hear it. But here is how it ends. Nehemiah successfully rebuilds the wall of Jerusalem. Awesome. It's a great ending. The good guys win. It's awesome. But when we see this journey together today and in the next few weeks as we look at this together, you're going to see some really cool stuff. Nehemiah is rich with spiritual principles, leadership principles. Books have been written from the book of Nehemiah, out of the book of Nehemiah, to help CEOs make better decisions. This is how rich this book is, and I think you're going to really enjoy what you experience. But here's the one thing I told you each week. We're going to hear this one thing that we must do, that we got to do to allow ourselves to be under construction, to allow ourselves to experience the newness that God wants us to experience. And here it is. Meet with the architect. It's the first thing that Nehemiah did. And you know what I'm talking about. I'll say it. God is the master architect. He created the entire universe. He knit you together in your mother's womb. Let that sink in for a little bit. Who should we consult about the questions of what could be and what should be in our lives, in our church? It's a no-brainer. I mean, Dr. Phil's pretty cool, but this one trumps him even. The God of the universe. I think about this in terms of our church. And I mentioned we actually had a sermon series back in the late summer, early fall, and we talked about our vision as a church, and you're going to hear a lot of that during this sermon series as well. We embarked on a journey. We talked about reaching the people that are right around us and doing our demographic studies. We got so many young families around us that aren't going to church. They're not being reached with the gospel. We want to do a better job of that. And so we knew we had issues. That wasn't the problem. We knew we had issues. Like, for instance, our kids had, now we got it down to 2 without having to do anything much different, but we had 3 check-in areas for our kids here at Hickory Grove. Our kids space, we know, just is not consolidated, and it's not set up for optimum flow or even optimum security, which is an issue. And we literally have had families come and visit here, and back when we had 3 check-ins, we would literally hear back from them, "That was crazy. We just want to try another church," because that was hard. We brought our kids, and it was like a marathon. You know, I wanted to say, "Hey, but check your Fitbit. We got you some good steps in trying to find the kids space," you know. I mean, but that wasn't a win for them. You know, I mean, we knew there were issues, and it was enough to shake us to ask what could be, and especially what should be. If we are actually going to do what our mission statement says, and it says that we exist to do whatever it takes to help every person take their next step with Jesus, that whatever it takes, what are we willing to do then to fix this? Now, I feel like I was pretty confident that I know what we got to do. We got to consolidate our space, our kid space. We got to get it together. We got to make it better. We got to make it better space for families. If we're going to reach families we're surrounded with, God placed this church here among all these families that aren't being reached with the gospel, then I know we got to make it better. And we got to make it safer. We got to make it more consolidated. But that's about where my expertise ended, you know? So we consulted an architect. That's what you do. And it wasn't till way after we did that I started looking at the book of Nehemiah, preparing for this sermon series. I'm like, this is big. This is huge. This is something that we get. We just don't know we get it. We get that, right? I like to get on WebMD whenever I'm feeling something don't feel right and try to check and all that. But you know what? I've learned that's no good. If you're feeling bad, you need to go consult a physician. It's the best thing, right? Self-diagnosing. There's great tools out there, but we get that. And to do something really as important as remodeling our space here at Hickory Grove so that it will be safer and secure and optimum flow and better to reach our families, that was way above my skill set. So we met with an architect because I did not have the answers to the what and the how. What does that look like? How do we do that? We found this great company, Champlin Architecture, and they've been amazing to us, and I've been blown away with the journey. In fact, you're going to start seeing over the next few weeks some results of that journey. Even in our messages, we'll share pieces and pieces of what we're going to be experiencing as a church moving forward. But my point is, I am not an architect. There was obviously someone with greater knowledge and experience and expertise that had to help. And I want to tell you this. In God, you and I have someone who knows me better than I know myself. And certainly knows the future. And certainly knows the purpose for which he does anything or allows anything to happen. He has all of that. He has got all of that knowledge, stuff that we cannot know, and he has all of that. And because of this, the best thing you can ever do in your life is let God make your blueprint. The best thing you can ever do in your life. Let God design your blueprint. In fact, asking what could be or what should be is an awesome step, but it will never take you to the greatest outcome unless you let the architect of your life, the architect of the universe, answer that question. It's important to ask those questions. What could be? What should be? What could be in my life spiritually? What should be in my life spiritually? What could be in my marriage? What should be in my marriage? What could be in my workplace? You should be asking those. But the truth is, you could find all kinds of answers to that in lots of different places. You could get a blueprint from some places that may not be best. And that's why it's important that we go to the architect, the one who designed you, who made you, who designed the universe, who knows it, who sustains it, who holds the future. He is the one that we must consult with. When Nehemiah was shaken with the news of what it was like in Jerusalem, I don't know if he must not have been able, as he was swept away into another country, not seeing the end result of all that happened to Jerusalem. When he finally heard the news that it was in ruins, the people were in great distress. Literally Israel, as it once was a great nation, with King David, King Solomon, all the stories, the rich heritage, they were God's people on the planet. And yet he finds out that it isn't even a shadow of its former self. It's just demolished, destroyed, left in shambles. It shook him to his core. And what is the first thing he did? Went and grabbed a hammer and started to build the wall again. No. Before he did anything else, he went to the architect. He prayed, and he prayed, and he prayed. And I will tell you, friends, we cannot skip this step. When you skip prayer, you are choosing your best stab in the dark over God's perfect blueprint when you skip prayer. So don't do it. And I'm stepping on my own toes here because I'm a doer, man. There's a need. Oh, here's the question. Oh, there's an answer. Let's do it right now. Let's go. And I'm here to tell you, I've experienced that even with our church's journey with our architectural team, Champlin Architecture. When we began meeting with them, it was great, awesome meetings. I'm here to tell you, though, I thought that by now we'd already have a coat of paint somewhere. I thought by now we'd already hammered something or nailed something or tore up something and replaced it with something. But no, we've been on this journey with them, meeting with them over and over and over. And I'm like, woo, I'm glad that I met with them, because I would not have thought of that. Wouldn't have thought of that. Wouldn't have thought of that. Wouldn't have thought of that. That's why you meet with an architect. And friends, that's why we must take time to meet with the architect of our very lives. Let him make the blueprint. You may have made a list of resolutions already in your life, but have you brought that to God and say, what do you think? Has he signed off on those? He may sign off on those and add a few more. I don't know. Or he may say, take that away. How about we do this instead? Meeting with the architect takes time and patience, but it ensures the best build. That's true in real construction. It's also true in your life. There's no shortcuts. You can try them. I've tried them. And you know what? What I've learned in real construction, there was a time we took our youth group to do, this is years ago, we actually did some construction down in southeast Kentucky. And they bring in youth groups to do this. Fortunately, we brought with our group some people who knew some stuff about construction too. That was very helpful because if it were just me and the teenagers, they would have had to put us on a demolition. That would have been best for us. But there was a youth group that had come in before us that had got it. They had done the drywall. We were supposed to do the finish. They had done all the drywall. Guess what we did when we got there? We redid the drywall because they did not have someone who knew how to do that. And so I learned a lot about drywalling that week. But if you know as well as I do that if you don't know what you're doing and you try to do it, and there's nothing wrong with maybe trying to learn and whatever, but you have someone come in that knows what they're doing and let them take the lead and let them coach, let them design, let them lead, it can get done better. It's going to be the best build. You do not want me to come doing any construction on your house. That's not me. And here's the thing. I think sometimes we get ahead of God, and when we get ahead of God and we try to do things our way, the best way we know how, we don't spend time consulting with Him, there's going to be times we're going to have to strip away what was even done and start all over. It's going to be 4 steps back when we thought we were moving 3 steps forward. All because we skipped the step of meeting with the architect. It takes time to do that. It takes patience to do that. But it absolutely ensures the best build. We can't do it as a church. We can't skip that step, and we certainly can't do that to ourselves. Let Him put you and even this church under construction. Let Him do it. Let Him paint the picture of what could be. Let Him paint the vision of what should be in your life. And He may only give it to you piece by piece. So it's going to take patience. But if you let Him make the blueprint, you are guaranteed to experience His will, which is always good and always right and always perfect. Now, I don't know about you, what else would you possibly want? And maybe that's the real question here. Do you want His will? Do you want His plan for your life? Or do you want yours? Do you want His will for your life, truly, really? And if you do, then I believe you're not only going to begin to ask the questions, what could be and what should be, but you will take those questions to Him in your life. The good news for you and for me is that we ain't the architect. He is. And if you go to Him, and you meet with Him, and you tell Him everything, and you listen, and you pray, and you get in His Word and listen to what He says here as well, and you spend time with Him, and you spend time with people who are following Him, like I talked about in groups, or gather together and worship here today. You spend time with people who are following Him, perhaps following Him longer than you've been following Him. You add all those ingredients together, it's going to result in God giving you piece by piece the blueprint of what He wants in your life. It will take time. It will take patience. It will take humility. It will take trust. It will take discomfort. It will take change. But in the end, God's got something beautiful He wants to build. in your life, in this church. The question is, will you let him? I'm going to close with sharing just a few potential next steps for you to consider. First, very simple, easy one. If you do nothing else, if you absolutely do nothing else, please at least do this today. This could be a fun lunch conversation. You can maybe talk with someone you love and trust about, well, how would you answer that? This is just at least ask the questions, what could be or what should be in my life? Ask that question. If nothing else, at least ponder the question. But another next step could be this, to meet with the architect now. Take those questions to him. Have you done that? Have you actually said, okay, God, I'm coming to you. You are the expert. What is it? Here's a blank piece of paper. Here's a blank canvas. You begin to draw the blueprint in my life, piece by piece, and I'll follow it. I'll trust you. And I'll wait to hear what it is you want me to do. Meet with the architect. Begin meeting now. And then here's another one. Reject all other blueprints but his. That's a big one. Because there's going to be other blueprints vying for your attention. Namely, yours. Usually it's the one you're wanting, that you're creating. And you're going to feel a tension if you begin this journey of letting God make you into something different than what you thought you ever could be. If you begin that journey today and you start letting him do this, you start meeting with him and praying and praying and praying and saying, God, answer these questions in my life. If you start doing that, you're going to feel it suddenly oppose some of the things you thought you wanted to construct in your life. The way you wanted to remodel is not necessarily the way he wants to remodel. And so you're going to have a choice to make in this journey. Will you reject all other blueprints but his? I want to close with this verse. I was thinking about this. The book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament is a great book of the Bible. You got Solomon basically chasing after meaning in life. And he tells the whole story of that pursuit all through the book of Ecclesiastes. But I'm going to give you how that story ends also. I'm going to give you a spoiler, how the book of Ecclesiastes ends. Here's what it says, Ecclesiastes 12, 13, and 14. It says, that's the whole story. Here now is my final conclusion. Fear God and obey his commands. For this is everyone's duty. God will judge us for everything we do, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. The end. That's how he ends it. He talks about pursuing knowledge and pleasure and happiness and all the things that we sometimes chase after. He did all the chasing for us and gave us the conclusion like, here's what you need to pursue. God. Because he is your architect. He created the universe. He created you. And the end game for God is that he did everything it took to be able to spend eternity with you in heaven. And if you've placed your faith in Jesus, that's going to be where you get to experience that. And I believe so many times here on this side of eternity, we get so focused on the temporal and not focused on what's eternal, what really matters. Living for him. Letting him do his good and perfect will in us and through us. Friends, I'm asking you today to ask what could be and what should be. But if you want to go that extra mile, take those questions to him today. And the next day. And the next day. So that the conclusion of your story will be yes, to fear God, to obey his commands. In other words, to meet with the architect and to follow his blueprint. But it's up to you to do that.